Sony and Marvel are setting up Spider-Man's MCU Endgame. Earlier this summer, Marvel fans were left weeping when Tom Holland's Spider-Man was unceremoniously dumped from the Marvel Cinematic Universe after Sony, who owns the film rights to Spider-Man, and Disney-controlled Marvel Studios couldn't come to a deal that would allow the wall crawler to play in the MCU sandbox. However, last week, those tears of sadness became tears of joy when Sony and Disney made nice and announced that the webhead would return to the MCU for 2 more movies. The third in his standalone series that started with Spider-Man Homecoming and an unspecified future Marvel film. While it was nice to see 2 corporations coming together for the sake of their audiences and the promise of billion-dollar paydays, it became clear that this would be a way to give fans some closure and allow Peter Parker to bow out of the MCU gracefully to go spend time with his new family of goo monsters and living vampires. The last we had seen of Spidey on the big screen was the cliffhanger ending to Far From Home. And now that we know that this storyline is going to be wrapped up in the 3rd Spider-Man solo film set to release in 2021, Sony's path moving forward on how to get Spider-Man to jump universes is becoming more and more clear. The first big piece of evidence comes from Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige himself. Regarding the webhead's return, he said this: "I am thrilled that Spidey's journey in the MCU will continue, and I and all of us at Marvel Studios are very excited that we get to keep working on it." He went on to say he also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes, so as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, you never know what surprises the future might hold. Let's peel back the layers of what was said here. 1. This is reconfirmation that the MCU and Sony's universe of Marvel characters are 2 separate universes. 2. Spider-Man will be leaving the MCU for the Sony universe. 3. The door is left open for Spider-Man to swing back into Marvel Cinematic Universe if the stars align. Now, with the universe hop confirmed, how could this take place? Both sides of this deal want this to be done in a satisfying way that keeps fans on board with both the characters and their continuing stories. And like we said before, billions of dollars are at stake. Well, the answer might have been hidden under our noses this whole time. The day before Sony and Marvel publicly kissed and made up, Sony announced that they would be making a Madam Web solo flick as part of their Sony universe of Marvel characters. Now, if you haven't pulled out your long boxes in a while, Madam Web was introduced in 1980 in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 210 as a sometimes ally to Peter Parker. While her powers are psychic in nature and include things like precognition and clairvoyance, the 90s animated Spider-Man series gave her one new power that was afterwards added to her comic book appearances as well: the ability to cross universes and realities. Obviously, you can see where we're going with this. Wow, what an incredibly useful power for someone to have in this situation where we need Spider-Man to jump from one universe to another. The timing of the 2 announcements is too perfect to be a coincidence. Plus, having 2 more MCU films for Spider-Man to appear in gives them enough runway to make the change painless and earned. It basically would be Spider-Man's Endgame for the MCU, allowing him to say goodbye, but still leave the door open for later appearances if Sony and Marvel decide they like more money than just a lot of money. Kind of similar to how Iron Man's Endgame and Avengers Endgame didn't really end his game in the MCU, as RDJ is expected to be seen in the upcoming Black Widow film, which ironically enough is Black Widow's Endgame. However, one question we have: when/if the inevitable universe switch happens, what happens to Ned Leeds, Aunt May, and the rest of the gang? They lived through the snap and the blip on the MCU's side. Do they also get sucked into the Sonyverse? We're definitely interested in seeing how the 2 sides handle the switcheroo. And as we speculated last week, there's still a chance that the MCU won't be without its own friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, even with the departure of Parker. With Homecoming teasing out Miles Morales, we could see a world where, like his comic book counterpart, Miles is inspired to take up the old web shooters following the death/disappearance of Peter. Animated films like Into the Spider-Verse aside, Sony is going to have their hands full with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and having Miles Morales as a live-action Spider-Man alongside a live-action Peter Parker might be too much for the Sony audiences. But since Miles' rights also live with Sony, that feels like a Sony-Disney deal for another day. But what do you folks think? Are you glad that Spider-Man's run in the MCU will have a satisfying conclusion? Are you excited for him to join the rest of his Spider characters in Sony's universe of Marvel characters? And do you think the key to it all is Madam Web? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, why not give us a like and subscribe? If you want to get notified every time we go live with a show or drop a new video, feel free to mash that little bell so you can be up to date on all the latest theories, news, and rumors in the pop culture world.